Flaws are the secret to making your fantasy characters relatable and interesting. Yet most new fantasy writers approach flaws the wrong way. I know I did when I started out, but after publishing 4 fantasy books and after coaching over 200 writers in my different programs, I've realized that there's a much better approach to designing meaningful flaws for your characters. Once you see this, you're never going to be able to unsee it again, because you're going to realize that this approach has created some of the absolute best characters that you have ever read. Okay, so to start with, what is the wrong way to build character flaws? Well, the wrong way is to do it randomly. Maybe you look at a list of different character flaws and you go, I guess my character is impatient, I guess maybe she's greedy, and maybe she's clumsy as well. I'll explain why this approach is an issue in a moment, but first of all, if you're feeling called out here, don't stress. When I was a new fantasy writer, I did this all the time. And in some of my previous YouTube videos, I've probably even shared lists of different character flaws to get you to use this approach. It is certainly better than not having any flaws for your characters at all. That's because when you write characters without flaws, they just don't feel that interesting and they just don't feel that relatable. And you're not really giving them any room for growth or the capacity to go on this adventure to overcome this internal struggle within them. Because like it or not, you and me, we both have plenty of flaws in our life. I know I certainly do. And when we see those reflected in the characters we read about, it makes it so much easier for you and me to identify with them and to cheer when they overcome those flaws. Okay, so what actually is the issue with the kind of random flaws approach, where you're just grabbing flaws from anywhere and you're just pasting them onto your characters? Well, the big issue here is that it lacks a sense of cohesion with the character's true nature. So let me explain the better approach to designing character flaws, and you're gonna see why this is far superior. The better approach is to ask yourself, what is my character's greatest strength? And then you ask yourself, what weakness does that strength create? I call this the power paradox. And the reason why this is so interesting is because in life, whatever our greatest power is, when it's taken to an extreme, it often becomes a liability. So for instance, if you are extremely organized, that is amazing. It probably means you stay on top of things, but it might also mean that you suffocate the fun out of some experiences and you say no to things just because they're spontaneous and they don't fit into your organized plans. If you are extremely confident, that maybe allows you to inspire other people, and it maybe means that you are quick to take action because you just know that this is going to succeed. But it probably also means that sometimes you rush into poor decisions. Likewise, if you are extremely kind to other people, always doing things for other people, that probably leads to you being able to give a lot of love in your life, but it might also mean that you are a tremendous people pleaser, or that some people take advantage of your generosity. So that right there is the power paradox. Your greatest strength often forms your greatest weakness. Let's run through 5 character case studies to see this principle in action. The first example I want you to look at is Logen Ninefingers from the First Law series by Joe Abercrombie. Logan's greatest strength is that he is this incredibly fearsome barbarian warrior from the north. His name sparks terror. He survives brutal battles, he outsmarts his enemies, and he wins from seemingly impossible situations. But that same strength also forms his greatest weakness. Because throughout the series, Logan is trying to get away from the violence of his past. He is constantly trying, or at least he says he wants to become, a better man. Yet the very thing that made him strong, his tremendous skill with violence, keeps dragging him back towards bloody situations. Another example is Harry Potter from the Harry Potter series. Harry's greatest strength is his willingness to sacrifice himself for others. In this sense, he is a polar opposite from Voldemort, who tries to get other people to sacrifice themselves for him. So this means that Harry repeatedly puts himself in situations where he is in danger in order to try and protect the people he loves. But you can probably see where this is going, right? That same strength of being willing to sacrifice himself for others also creates his greatest weakness. Because Harry's instinct and his eagerness for self-sacrifice often makes him extremely reckless and extremely prone to guilt-driven decision-making. He carries around this kind of crushing weight of responsibility from trying to protect and save other people around him. And he often struggles with feeling like he could have done more, he could have been a better protector. At times, this leads him to isolate himself from his friends, or to make really dangerous decisions or go off on really dangerous solo missions by himself because he doesn't want other people to get hurt, but then it kind of leads to other people getting hurt because of that. Our third case study here is Shallan from the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson. Shallan's greatest strength is her ability to create alternate identities. Using a combination of her light weaving powers, where she can kind of craft illusions, and also the skills she slowly develops as a spy over the course of the series, she learns how to adopt different personalities like Veil or Radiance to help her adapt to different situations. But this same chameleonic skill is also her greatest weakness, because her ability to kind of create new versions of herself, to have these alternate personalities, she sort of uses it to escape from traumatic events in the past. She fragments her identity, and this means that sometimes she struggles to know who is the real Shallan, who is the real true version of me, which holds her back in her relationships with others, and really affects her own mental well-being. Our fourth character case study is Paul Atredies from June. What do you think Paul's greatest strength is? I would say it's his ability to have these prescient visions of the future. He can perceive the branching paths of possibility, allowing him to navigate war and politics and relationships with this supernatural insight. But as we follow the power paradox theory, you can see how this greatest strength of his also becomes his greatest weakness. Because Paul's prescience, his ability to see into the future, it often traps him in the present. And it often leads him into situations where he feels like he has no free will. He feels like he's just a train running down this track with no ability to deviate. We see this a little bit in June, but it becomes significantly more pronounced in June Messiah, which is the second book in the series. The more clearly that Paul sees this holy war that's going to be waged in his name, the more he realizes that he is kind of like trapped and unable to stop this horrible thing from happening, even though he is a being of tremendous power and political influence. So his gift of foresight becomes a prison of destiny, forcing him to make decisions that he knows is going to lead to the deaths of billions of people, but he knows he kind of has to do it because there are even worse possibilities out there in the future. And then our fifth and final character case study is Kaz Brekker from Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. I would say that Kaz's greatest strength is his meticulous planning. He's a thief and a criminal, and he comes up with these incredibly complex, really well thought out schemes in order to con people and steal money. And he's really, really good at thinking through every little detail and every little contingency. Yet this same obsession with planning also creates his biggest flaw, which is that his need to control every variable of a situation often makes him unable to handle the unpredictability of human relationships and genuine human connection. He often keeps his friends, his crew members, and even the love interest he develops in the story at arm's length, because people can't always be planned for or controlled in the way that he likes. And that, of course, is an internal struggle that he learns to work on and improve as the story progresses. So I could go on with this, and you are more than welcome to leave some other character examples down in the comments below. But with all these characters, I hope you can see that their flaws make them interesting because they're not just pasted onto them randomly. They are using the power paradox to look at this character's biggest strength and then identify what weakness that strength creates. And when you can do this, it creates a much better sense of cohesion in your own story. So with your own fantasy characters, I want you to think about this right now. Ask yourself, what is this character's greatest strength? And then what weakness will that create? That is how you write compelling flaws that drive your plot forward in an interesting way. Of course, flaws are just one aspect of a great fantasy character. Watch this video over here to learn about the 10 most common protagonist mistakes that I see new fantasy writers make all the time. If you can learn how to avoid these mistakes, you're going to stand a much better chance of writing a character that readers love. Keep writing and keep striving, and I'll see you in the next video.